I could do this all day.
There's no denying the fact that Avengers Endgame was an epic movie. I mean, statistically speaking, it's the most successful film ever released to theaters, so it must have done a few things right. However, despite its greatness, there were a few things that weren't exactly perfect. One thing that irked a lot of people is the way that they wrapped things up with Captain America. After being one of the top stars of the MCU for nearly a decade, and a bona fide leader of the Avengers, it felt strange how they tied up his entire story arc. Unlike Iron Man or Black Widow, who sacrificed themselves for the greater good, Steve Rogers kinda just, retires. And he doesn't even do it in the present time either. The first two act selflessly, opting to save the world. Meanwhile, Cap's exit from the MCU was a little uncharacteristically selfish. At the end of the movie, Steve takes it upon himself to go and return all of the Infinity Stones to their rightful place, and then uses the last of the Pym particles to venture back to the 1940s, where he lives out a happy life with his love Peggy Carter. Sure, the world is safe from Thanos for now, but is the world really so under control that Steve can comfortably abandon his duties and just go live a regular life free from the burdens of protecting the innocent? It's implied that he passes along the Captain America moniker to Falcon, and that Steve Rogers finally gets to rest and enjoy a normal life. I guess after an entire life of helping people, he deserves to enjoy some happiness. Only, it's not really explained what he does when he goes back in time. We know he lives out a full life, but, doing what? We never learn what happened to Steve Rogers once he goes back in time. Well, perhaps he didn't completely abandon his hero duties after all. Perhaps he simply found a better way to impact the world. Think about it. When Steve hands his shield over to Falcon, he also refuses to tell him what he did with his life.
How'd that work out for you? It was beautiful.
Why the secrecy? Of course, the old pals share a smile with one another, and it's just mutually understood that they both know what's up. We see a flashback of Steve dancing with Peggy in their living room, and a happy and loving life together is implied. But aside from all that beautiful love stuff, what did Steve Rogers do with himself all those years? He's a bona fide superhero with morals of steel and an unbendable will. It would stand to reason that he must have accomplished something worthwhile in those decades, right? He's a remarkable, extraordinary man. You got to assume he did something of value. What could Steve Rogers possibly have done with his life after going back in time? Well, we think we have the answer. He just changed his name to Fred. That's right, he decided he was done punching bad guys in the face, and decided the more efficient and effective way to make the world a better place was to teach people how to be kinder and more honest and compassionate from a younger age. He started a local PBS show that eventually got syndicated, where his show talked about standing up to bullies, loving those who are different from ourselves, and personal responsibility. Captain America Steve Rogers goes back in time to become the unforgettable Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
What?
For those unfamiliar with the show, it aired from 1968 all the way until 2001, and spoke directly to young viewers, treating them like intelligent people, unlike other kids shows that tend to dumb themselves down for the audience. The show featured experiments, music, crafts, and other activities. It also had puppet segments and parts where Mr. Rogers would interview people from around the neighborhood. The whole thing was geared towards properly raising children to be respectful, curious, and compassionate. Now, does that not sound like something Steve Rogers would do? Especially if he suddenly had about 70 years of free time? And we haven't even touched on their similarities yet. They both share an inherent goodness, they're both American icons, and of course the same last name. They're warm and caring and have an inherent sense of calm that's contagious to other people. They both reserve a place of honor in the hearts of many. It would only make sense that Steve Rogers dedicates his life to helping children learn in a safe and inclusive environment, right?
If I see a situation pointed south, I can't ignore it.
After all, when he wasn't kicking butt and superheroing around in the MCU, he held grief counseling sessions to help people after the events of Avengers Infinity War. Physically, there's a slew of parallels as well. I mean, for starters, they're both old white men with gray hair. Sure, old Steve Rogers has a bit of a Joe Biden thing going on, but there's no denying his resemblance to Mr. Rogers either. They could totally pass for the same person. They've got similar haircuts, similar facial features, and similar builds. Yep, that's right, Mr. Rogers was jacked. He never really took off his sweater, so we never got to see it, but that dude was ripped, I assume. They also have a unique ability to remain calm and natural and respectful of others. Honestly, it's kind of tough to imagine any other outcome for the first Avenger. Can you think of anything else Steve Rogers would have done with his life if he wasn't obligated to serve as a superhero? I highly doubt he just had a regular job and lived a completely ordinary life. He may have quit beating up villains, but there's no chance that Steve Rogers could sit idly by without helping the world in some capacity for all those years. There's no alternate to really consider. The Mr. Rogers theory is heartwarmingly possible. If I'm being frank, it's the only closure to the Steve Rogers tale that I care to consider. Also, if I'm being frank, I'd probably say something like, "Hey, what's up? I'm Frank."
Very funny, very funny, very funny.
Okay, so if this theory is accurate, then how does it actually make sense? Well, Cap goes back in time in the 1940s. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood didn't start airing until 1968, so that would give him some time to ramp up to a TV show. Steve's from the future, so he understands the power and influence that the media has at this point. Back in the 1960s, a television show wasn't quite the big deal that it is today. He knows that having an audience is the greatest way to influence the masses, so he figures out a way to inform and educate as many people as possible. It also doesn't hurt that he doesn't have to jump out of any more military planes with this career route.
I understood that reference.
There's one small detail that throws a wrench in this theory, though, and that's the fact that Steve Rogers was born in 1918, while Fred Rogers was born in 1928. Okay, so it's possible that someone, somewhere, fudged some numbers and got it a decade wrong. Or they're so similar, both physically and morally, that it's entirely possible they're actually brothers. Captain America enlists in the US Army because he was horrified by the suffering of the Nazi victims. Meanwhile, his brother Fred went into children's TV and developed puppets, music, and characters. Unfortunately, Mr. Rogers passed away in 2001 after a fulfilling life of influencing youth for the better. Meanwhile, in the comics, Steve Rogers passed away in 2007, only a few short years after his brother. There's even a popular urban legend that Mr. Rogers was a sniper in the Special Ops. The rumor has never been confirmed, but perhaps people were just confusing a family resemblance. He'd never gone to battle, but his older brother certainly did, countless times. In a way, they both fought similar fights, just with different methods. Their main goal on both accounts was simply to make the world a better place. That's the goal, and it should realistically be more people's top priority. They're both wonderful role models who should be looked up to and idolized. Caring about people will never go out of style, and will always be cool. It's all but assured at this point that Captain America's time in the MCU has come to a close. The Infinity War saga is over and done with, and Marvel has moved on to Phase 4 of their game plan, featuring a whole new story arc and a bunch of new heroes. Plus, their contract with Chris Evans has come to an end, and there was no word of a new contract, so that's a pretty dead giveaway as well. Meanwhile, Steve Rogers may be done on the big screen, but Fred Rogers is only just getting started. Tom Hanks is set to play the role in the feature film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Keep your eyes peeled to see if you can catch any Captain America Easter eggs in it. Maybe when he goes to the closet to change his coat into his sweater, there's just a blue and red spandex jumpsuit hanging there, who knows? One thing is for certain, whether these men are in fact one and the same or share some sort of family relation, they're both heroes by its truest definition. While one fought to protect the innocent, the other took an alternative route to educating impressionable youth. The world didn't need Steve Rogers anymore, but it absolutely needed Fred Rogers. If he went back in time and made that switch, it's because he knew how he'd be the most valuable and how he'd impact the most people's lives for the better. It's the only way he can influence the world the most. Sure, Steve Rogers is of, quote, peak human ability and consistently fights galactic enemies of astronomical power and somehow manages to win, but it's almost secondary when considering the importance of Fred Rogers. That is the truest hero of them all. Fred Rogers was not just the hero that we needed, he was the hero that we deserved. And you know what? He served us well. And Captain America, you're pretty cool too. What do you think? Who's the greater hero, Steve or Fred? Let us know your pick in the comments section below and explain why. Make sure to tune in next week as we discuss how Roman the Accuser is actually George Washington. Before you go, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to ScreenRant to stay up to date on all of our latest releases. Until next time, bye!